Waking up at 3 o'clock a.m. every night during perimenopause is unfortunately super common. Let's talk about some of the reasons why so you can figure out where you want to focus your resources. It's worth finally figuring out, and you don't have to do so by randomly guessing anymore. You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 269, Waking Up at 3 a.m. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for forward-thinking women who know it's theoretically possible to get to the other side of menopause without developing the standard list of chronic diseases and limitations, but aren't totally clear about how exactly to tip the odds in their favor without a live-in staff of experts on retainer to optimize every aspect of her health. You can do it, and you don't have to be rich and famous to get there. Let's get started. If you remember, a few weeks ago in episode 266, we talked about different reasons why you can't sleep. Inadequate sleep pressure, circadian rhythm disruptions, hyperarousal, and sleep architecture problems. Of course, they're all interconnected and all required for a good night's sleep, but doing all the right things to improve your circadian rhythm when you don't actually have a problem with your circadian rhythm will make you pretty frustrated pretty fast. So figuring out where your struggle is and focusing your effort there goes a long way toward improving your sleep. We also talked about cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia in that episode and a previous episode, episode 221. It's hands down the best, most well-tested, longest lasting, most effective sleep treatment in the world, full stop. And the reason why is because it systematically works through each of these 4 areas of sleep trouble. So each one gets optimized one by one. I'll put the same links in the show notes today to the CBTI apps and book that you can try if you're interested. When I was preparing for episode 266, I gathered a mountain of information about waking up at 3 a.m. due to hormone changes around the time of perimenopause and realized that I had to separate all that stuff out and save it for later. And now it's later, so here we are. Why is the perimenopausal transition so correlated with waking up in the middle of the night? If you used to be a gold medal sleeper and suddenly found yourself feeling like you were moved from the Olympics to an involuntary fight club, you're not alone. And I think it's worth understanding what is known about why this happens around the time of perimenopause, which isn't enough, what is known, but it's just your hormones isn't a good enough answer, and it doesn't do anything to help you stop waking up at 3 a.m. One of the hormones that's super important for sleep is melatonin. We talked all about melatonin in episode 254. That's a good one to go back to if you want more information on melatonin during perimenopause. Melatonin is all about your circadian rhythm, so that's where it fits into our sleep framework, and why it's probably not enough to solve all of your sleep issues. As important as it is, it's part of one piece of the sleep framework. A hormone that could possibly have a lot to do with your frightful 3 a.m. wake up is cortisol. Good, healthy, fluctuating cortisol levels are a good thing. It's not the enemy all the time. We want our cortisol to go up in the morning. We just want our levels to rise and fall at the appropriate times and within the appropriate ranges. Healthy, normal cortisol naturally starts to rise between 2 and 4 o'clock a.m. Not to levels that should wake you up, but behind the scenes, it's prepping for your morning Krav Maga class or whatever. If your baseline cortisol level is too high all the time, that 3 a.m. rise might be enough to tip you over the edge into waking you up. It does also seem that estrogen and progesterone help keep cortisol levels stable and steady, and removing them or decreasing them makes cortisol regulation more haphazard. So it's highly possible that a cortisol spike is causing your early morning awakening, and that the cortisol spike is contributed to by too low of an estrogen and or progesterone level, and or too high of a baseline cortisol level. Additionally, progesterone competes with cortisol for cellular binding sites for corticosteroid binding globulin, glucocorticoid receptors, and mineral corticoid receptor sites. So when you have less progesterone running around and binding to receptors, you have more opportunities for cortisol to bind to cellular receptors and cause cortisol-y results, like waking up and feeling stressed and having high blood sugar and slow digestion and gaining fat and feeling fatigued in the afternoon. And if that's not enough, high cortisol disrupts estrogen receptor function, increasing symptoms of low estrogen. It can also reduce your conversion of T4 thyroid hormone to T3 thyroid hormone, adding to fatigue and weight gain. In addition to low estrogen and progesterone and high baseline cortisol, cortisol might spike in the night due to a blood sugar drop. If you took my advice in episode 265 and you've considered employing a continuous glucose monitor as a teacher for a while to help you figure out ways to put more years lived in good health into your future, you can easily tell whether you have blood sugar crashes during the night. I have to shut my phone completely off every night when I'm wearing one because I don't want it to wake me up with a low glucose alarm, which it does. And it's very loud. It's a safety feature that you can't turn off. So this is potentially an area that I could work on. While you want overall low blood sugar levels, like in the 70s, you don't want them dipping or spiking all over the place. And it could be contributing to the middle of the night wake up, as could eating right before you go to bed. You want to not eat for at least 3 hours before bedtime and not eat anything that will spike or dip your blood sugar right before bedtime. A 2024 study published in a journal called Maturitas showed that women with higher nighttime cortisol experience more awakenings and spent less time in deep restorative stages of sleep. Chronic nighttime cortisol spikes were linked to insulin resistance, increased belly fat, poor memory consolidation, and an increased risk for anxiety and depression. The higher your cortisol, the more your body stays alert, which means shallow sleep, easily waking up, and mornings where you feel less alert than you think you should. If you're thinking cortisol might be a thing that's keeping you up, you can test your cortisol if you want to. It's part of a Dutch Complete test, which is super helpful. We'll talk about Dutch tests in a few weeks. You can also get a hormone saliva test for cortisol. You want to test your levels 4 times throughout the day to get a picture not just of your total level, but of your curve throughout the day. I just did a saliva cortisol test last week, and man, that's a lot of saliva. I think I'd rather have someone stick a needle in my arm, but I'd also rather not have to drive to the lab and wait in line for someone to stick a needle in my arm. So in the end, it was fine, but harder than I expected to produce 4 vials of saliva. But it was worth it. The test was actually super informative for me. Even though it is possible that your cortisol just happened to be higher or lower than average on the one day you tested, which could be problematic, I think overall it's a worthwhile test if you're worried about it. You want to test it 4 times in a day, though, not just a single test. Then you can go down the route of developing a logical treatment plan for something that you know is really happening, instead of being sold a bunch of supplements for a problem that you don't even know whether you have, which happens a lot in the supplement world. I've also heard doctors say that they don't bother to test for high cortisol because people can feel if they have it. They know that they're stressed. I don't think so. I think it's very true that some people don't report feeling stressed at all and have high cortisol. And some people report feeling stressed all the time and their cortisol level is fine. Supplemental estrogen and progesterone can also help you get your cortisol back in line if they're low and your cortisol is high. Next up, let's talk about a neurotransmitter called GABA, which stands for gamma-aminobutyric acid. You've probably heard of GABA before. It's your main inhibitory neurotransmitter, slowing down electrical activity and inhibiting racing thoughts and brain overexcitation. GABA is essential for sleep. You can take a GABA supplement, which will probably help you fall asleep a little faster if getting to sleep in the first place is your sleep problem. A GABA supplement doesn't usually help you stay asleep, but the GABA that you produce in your own brain helps you both fall asleep and stay asleep because it keeps going through the night. And it promotes correct sleep architecture, which is big, helping you move through all the phases of sleep appropriately. Benzodiazepine drugs, sedatives, bind to and enhance GABA receptors. they cause other problems that make them not a good option for sleep. But there's something else that binds to and enhances GABA receptors. Do you know what it is? A metabolite of progesterone called allopregnenolone. Not enough progesterone in your body means less of a chance for GABA to do its chill out magic in your brain. Taking progesterone orally increases the proportion of allopregnenolone metabolite you'll get from your progesterone, and why you want to take your progesterone pills at bedtime. Okay, so we know about melatonin and cortisol and GABA. Let's talk about another hormone that can increase nighttime alertness that I never would have thought of. This is more for my own nerdy fascination, and there's not nearly enough data about it. I spend a lot of time looking, way too much, but there is some fascinating stuff. So FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. I've only ever thought of it as stimulating a follicle so that an egg can be released at the right time of menstrual cycle, or as a test that some doctors will do to quote unquote test for menopause, which whatever, we won't talk about that now. But as estrogen levels fall, the pituitary gland in our brain starts freaking out and releasing more and more FSH to try to whip our ovaries into making more estrogen, so it can develop a follicle that can lead to ovulation. As we run out of eggs, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, contributing to those wild swings of estrogen levels that happen during perimenopause. But it's typical for FSH levels to drastically increase around the time of perimenopause, and then they stay high until you die. Your pituitary gland is saying, "Mayday, mayday, please, I beg of you." The outlook is bleak because you need estrogen and progesterone up in here. A 2015 study in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism showed that high FSH independently correlates with more wakefulness after sleep onset and an increased number of nighttime awakening, independent of estradiol and progesterone levels. So it seems that FSH itself might be the very first instigator in the hormone-related sleep riot. If your FSH is creeping up, you're more likely to wake up after falling asleep. Remember, FSH goes up and it stays high from the time you start running out of eggs until you die. Almost no doctors purposely replace your estradiol to a level that will suppress your FSH, but a few do. And this is one of the very many reasons why those women just seem to do better. Working with a practitioner who is willing to be different and replace your hormones in a way that mimics your own 30-year-old physiology sends different signals to all of the cells and organs of your body than giving you the lowest possible dose for the shortest possible duration to take the edge off your worst symptoms, which is the standard treatment. I digress. FSH, it's fascinating. Estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone all play a direct role in being able to produce quality sleep. And I looked through charts and charts and charts of studies comparing sleep in women with physiologic versus menopausally low levels of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And charts and charts and charts of studies showing that taking hormone replacement improves sleep quality and quantity. Compared to placebo, progesterone reduces the time spent awake after initially falling asleep, and it increases slow wave sleep duration. Progesterone's study-reported effects seem to correlate with how poor sleep architecture was before starting taking it. So it won't change good, healthy sleep, but it can really change poor sleep architecture in women who have low progesterone levels. A lot of that could come from GABA, but there's also probably more to it than just that. Studies also show that lower estrogen levels are associated with more frequent nighttime awakenings and poorer sleep architecture. And obviously, you're at an increased risk for hot flashes and night sweats when your estrogen level is really low, which adds to the sleep problem, but the sleep problem happens independent of hot flashes and night sweats. There are a set of nerves in your hypothalamus gland inside your brain called the kisspeptin neurokinin B dynorphin neurons that are highly estrogen sensitive and are the brain circuits controlling both sleep-wake cycles and body temperature. Physiologic testosterone levels are also associated with better sleep than low testosterone levels. There are, of course, many other reasons why you might wake up in the middle of the night. It's worth considering whether you could possibly have sleep apnea. Progesterone helps keep airway muscles toned, and low progesterone dramatically increases your risk of sleep apnea. If you think you might stop breathing during the night, it's worth it to get a sleep study. There are lots of them that can be done at home now. I also think it's very valuable to make sure you're breathing through your nose while you sleep. Slow breathing through your nose tells your brain to relax, in addition to doing all of the good things that nasal breathing does for you. I frequently tape my mouth shut while I sleep, and you might consider doing so too. Restless leg syndrome is another common cause of nighttime awakening, and it's worth treating if you have it so that you can get better sleep. Nocturia, having to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, is a reason for waking up and something to look into if you feel like that is the root of your problem. Oftentimes, if you wake up in the night for another reason, you'll find yourself needing to go to the bathroom, but it's not so badly that you couldn't have slept through it had you stayed asleep. But if waking up to urinate is a guaranteed part of your night, it's worth getting it checked out. What you eat and drink can play a big role in whether you stay asleep all night, too. Alcohol and caffeine can wreck your sleep, so can eating within 3 hours of bedtime, especially a big meal. When your body is too busy digesting food, it can't do all of the fabulous restorative things it's able to do when it's not digesting while trying to sleep. Plus, we already talked about blood sugar, highs and lows, messing with sleep, and with cortisol. Nicotine and other drugs also can impair sleep, including sleeping pills. Waking up at 3 a.m. could also possibly just be a byproduct of your environment. This is why all the sleep hygiene things are important. Light, noise, temperature, bedding are all things to optimize to stay asleep all night. Even allergens could be affecting your ability to stay asleep, so perhaps filtering your air or banishing your cat could help. If you wake up really early and stay awake, it could be that you have a circadian timing issue to work on and need a circadian realignment, forcing yourself to go to bed later in an effort to stay asleep longer. Lastly, hormone changes around the time of perimenopause can cause or worsen mental health struggles like depression and anxiety, or even non-clinically diagnosable stress and worry. It's not your fault. Having a tendency to worry or ruminate when you wake up in the middle of the night is super common and harder to avoid when your brain has less estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone to work with. It's physiological, especially estrogen. Also, when you're not sensitive to insulin. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia has lots of tools to help with this state of mental hyperarousal. Keeping a worry list and scheduling a certain time of day when you're awake to do all of your worrying is one of them. Stimulus control is another. Progressive muscle relaxation is another. Writing down a wrap-up of your day and or planning your tomorrow can be helpful. A specific and regimented bedtime routine is also a way to signal to your brain and body that it's now time to unwind and stop ruminating and problem solving. I hope this is helpful to understand how and why waking up in the middle of the night is so common around the time of menopause, because knowing more about the why and the how it applies to you specifically can help you figure out what you want to do about it. Maybe you want to test your cortisol. Maybe you want to fork out the money for a cooling mattress topper. Mine is fabulous, and it has, no exaggeration, changed my life. Maybe you're going to get a CBTI therapist or a book or try one of the apps. They work if you do exactly what they say to do. Maybe you're ready to test and optimize your sex hormones. In the meantime, when you wake up at 3 a.m., the first thing to do is to not look at or watch the clock, so you won't know it's 3 a.m. You shouldn't have your phone in your bedroom anyway, but be very sure not to look at that. Not knowing what time it is can help you fall asleep faster. Don't try to solve all of your life's problems. If you're thinking about something that worries you or that you feel like you need to remember to do something about, write it down somewhere where you know that you will deal with it the next day. Then forget about it. If you have trouble falling asleep because you keep worrying or thinking of things you need to do, Write them down so you can dismiss them from your brain. Look at being awake as an opportunity to meditate. Try your favorite meditation technique and get really good at dissociating from your thoughts and just being a breathing being who exists. Try progressive muscle relaxation, visualizing completely relaxing the muscles of each body part one at a time, starting with your feet and ending with your head. If you usually lie awake for hours, you're supposed to get out of bed and do something relaxing in the relative darkness, like read or listen to music. This is to make it so that you don't subconsciously associate being in bed with torture or get overly fixated on or frustrated with not being able to sleep. We may never be able to sleep as soundly as we did when we were teenagers, but we also don't need to be able to be healthy. Prioritizing your sleep in a way that doesn't produce sleep anxiety helps you feel better now and puts more years lived in good health into your future. Hormone shifts can throw a wrench in our ability to get the kind of sleep that we want and deserve, but sound sleep can be restored by focusing our efforts on the cause of our sleep difficulty instead of just trying a bunch of random stuff. Waking up in the middle of the night is especially frustrating, but rewiring your relationship to sleep is possible. It might take some consistent work over a period of time, but it's worth it. Don't give up, but also don't put too much pressure on yourself or get too caught up in the success of your efforts. Life is weird, right? We need to be committed and all in, but also detached from the outcome and ready to roll with whatever happens. So it is with sleep. Fully committed, fully unattached to the outcome. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end and for caring about your sleep. You're pretty fantastic. Next week, we're going to talk about the gender health gap and why it matters to you. Until then, be methodical about trying to solve your 3 a.m. wake up and don't be normal. Pat yourself on the back for sticking with it till the end of this episode. I know your attention is valuable and I don't take it lightly. I'm so grateful that you care about not settling for anything less than world-class care and results. Strong women who feel good change the future. I'd appreciate it so much if you'd share this podcast with a friend so we can make elite-level perimenopausal outcomes the rule rather than the exception. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events caused by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.